Sunday night. There's a particular melancholy to this moment, a feeling of borrowed time inevitably slipping through your fingers. The weekend, with all its warmth, dissolves in a silent sigh, leaving behind only the echo of what was. For me, Sunday ended with the same ritual as always, the warmth of her hand in mine, the last touch of comfort before the farewell. And then, the walk. The solitary trail along the damn sidewalk where my footsteps were the only ones to answer the goodbye I never said out loud. My routine was mathematical, flawless. I'd leave my girlfriend's house, walk, and arrive at the stop with just enough time for the 9:50 p.m. bus, the last carriage that would carry me peacefully back to the safe embrace of my home. But on that night, the universe was vibrating differently. There was something viscerally wrong. Even before the door to her house clicked shut, I felt uneasy, like an icy prickling at the nape of my neck. A march of invisible ants crawled under my skin. That feeling of electricity that makes the air sharp seconds before lightning strikes, that was it. A static charge bubbling inside my skull, like an omen buzzing with warning. I remember forcing a laugh, one that sounded hollow even to me. I have a bad feeling. The words escaped heavy, though I didn't know where the weight came from. She squeezed my hand harder. It wasn't a gesture of affection, but of restraint, as if trying to anchor me there, in that bubble of normality. "Text me when you get there," she asked. Her voice was a thread of tenderness and concern woven into the quiet of the night. As soon as I walked away, the silence collapsed upon the streets. It was palpable, an entity. Each step to the bus stop seemed to extend the distance, as if the very sidewalk were elongating in agony beneath my feet. The air was still, dense, laden with a suffocating strangeness. The light at the bus stop was yellowish, sickly. It bathed the deserted stop in a solitary spectrum that offered no comfort at all. On the contrary, the low hum of the bulb seemed to vibrate at the same frequency as the anxious pulse in my head. My bad feeling didn't dissipate. It nestled in my stomach like a knot of ice, a cold, silent certainty that I was on the edge of an invisible abyss. And then, the sound. The relief was a warm, immediate wave, an earthly, familiar sound. The promise of salvation, of soon being home under a familiar roof. The flame of hope rekindled in the darkness of my apprehension. Punctual as a clock, 9:50 p.m. But when the dark mass turned the corner, reality seemed to shatter. Where were the lights? Night buses cut through the darkness like giant fireflies, their interiors resplendent with cold white light. There are islands of normality in the night. But this was a shadow. A patch of darkness that seemed to absorb what little light the street had. A formless shape, it seemed to groan in agony, sliding over the asphalt with force, as if gravity's pull on it was twice as strong. Was it a backup vehicle? Maybe a small electrical problem, I whispered to myself. The mind tried to cling to any piece of logic as the metal mass approached. It stopped before me. The metallic sigh of the pneumatic doors opening was the only proof that it was real. They didn't open to an illuminated interior. They opened to a void, to blackness. I hesitated. For a second, my body refused to obey. Primal instinct screamed, begged me to back away, to run, but routine, the need to get home, the idiotic logic that it's just a bus, won. I swallowed hard and took the first step up. Stepping inside was like entering a mausoleum. The atmosphere was oppressive, heavy. A single flickering strip of light, weak and sickly, hovered over the driver's cabin. It cast dancing shadows that distorted shapes. It illuminated just enough to confirm his presence there. A figure hunched over the wheel, shoulders slumped, as if carrying the weight of all the world's nights on his back. The rest of the bus was swallowed by a darkness that seemed impenetrable. And the silence, my God, the silence. It wasn't an absence of sound, it was a presence. Thick as molasses, heavy as lead. No radio, no other passengers, just the monotonous groan of the engine mixed with the frantic beat of my own heart, a desperate drum in the void. My phone, of course, dead, a black, inert screen. No music to drown the fear, no distraction to use as an escape from all these sensations. I moved forward a bit. Each empty seat was a silent silhouette in the gloom, a specter waiting for something my mind refused to imagine. I stopped and decided to sit right behind the driver, seeking what little comfort I could, however pathetic, from that meager strip of light, like a moth seeking a candle in a tomb. The seat was cold, not the cold of air conditioning, a stone cold, the cold of abandonment. The thud of the doors sealed my fate. The bus roared and began to pick up speed. The world outside started to fade away. The city lights, the familiar sounds, everything became a blurred mirage through the window. But what little I could see seemed wrong. The streetlights were barely winning the battle against the darkness, weak, farther apart, casting anemic pools of light that couldn't pierce the night. And the houses, their windows were empty, dark orbits, dead husks, silent witnesses to an abandonment I couldn't explain. Time dissolved. Each second crawled by for an eternity. I was off the map, out of time, trapped in this tomb on wheels advancing towards an unknown destination, plunging ever deeper into the darkness. And I knew with a certainty that chilled my soul, I was not on the way home. Then, the bus began to slow down. The turn signal sounded, a methodical click that was the only thing breaking through what sounded like a battle coming from within the engine. 1, 2, 3. Each click pulsed with an echo in my skull. But where were we? I looked out the window, desperate for a landmark, anything familiar. There was nothing. The landscape outside wasn't a neighborhood, wasn't a street. It was a blur of darkness, a stretch of desolate road where the cracked asphalt was being swallowed by dark, creeping weeds. A single distant streetlight flickered, its weak light fighting a losing battle against the night. This wasn't a bus stop. The rear doors opened, as if reluctantly. Who boards from the rear doors at this hour in the middle of nowhere? No one does that. Protocol, logic, it all dissolved in that pneumatic hiss. I held my breath, my eyes fixed on the rearview mirror that gave me a partial view of the back steps. And then, I saw her. Emerging from the gloom at the roadside, a figure seemed to materialize. It was a woman. Old, ancient, hunched under the weight of invisible decades, her spine a perfect arc of submission to time. She was so thin her bones seemed to threaten to pierce the dark, shapeless fabric of her clothes. She moved with an agonizing slowness, dragging her feet as if she too was fighting against gravity, which seemed to want to pull her to the center of the earth. What was she doing there, alone in that wasteland? She didn't look at me. She didn't look at the driver. Her face was a mask of flickering shadows, impenetrable. She just continued her slow, shuffling advance into the bus. And with her, a cold that seemed to burn. It wasn't a breeze. It was an absence of warmth. A crypt-like cold that spread through the air like a fog. I felt it on my skin, on the hairs on my arms that stood up in a silent scream. With her came a smell. Subtle, but unexpected. The smell of damp earth, of decaying leaves, of rooms that haven't been opened in a century. She shuffled down the dark aisle, and of all the empty seats, all the silent silhouettes in the darkness, She chose hers, the seat directly behind me. I could feel it. Not just her presence, but the pressure of it behind me. The cold that emanated to my back was a spear of ice. My heart hammered in my chest. In my ears, a drum of panic in the sepulchral silence. Every fiber of my being was on high alert, as taut as a violin string about to snap. I didn't dare to turn. I didn't dare to breathe. I was caged. The driver in front of me, the darkness beside me, and death, sitting at my back. And then she began to whisper.
It was a thick sound, unpleasant, a murmur that seemed to come from deep within the earth. At first, my mind tried to fight it. It's just a senile old woman, I told myself. Old people do that. But no, that was not a human murmur. It wasn't rambling. The words, if they were words, were distorted, archaic, a dialect the human throat wasn't made to pronounce. My mouth went dry. My tongue felt like sandpaper glued to the roof of my mouth. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg the driver to stop this rolling nightmare, but my body wouldn't obey. I was pinned to the seat, paralyzed by a terror so pure, so absolute, it wrapped around me like a leaden shroud. Suddenly, the sound from her hit me full force, and my whole body broke out in goosebumps.
You're heading there too, aren't you? You know there's no coming back, right?
She pronounced in that terrifying way. But it wasn't just her voice, not what was said itself. She hadn't shouted, she hadn't threatened. She had passed a sentence on me. The words didn't enter through my ears, they touched my skin. Each shard of ice that shot down my spine and seemed to wrap my heart in icy claws. The blood in my veins froze. The world stopped. Was she talking to me? To the driver? Or to the other one? The one she brought with her from the darkness? The one I couldn't see? In a final, desperate act, my eyes shot to the only place they could go, the rearview mirror. I needed to see the driver's face. I needed a sign that I was crazy, that this was all a dream. And our eyes met. His face, it was livid, white as wax under the weak, sickly light. But it wasn't a face of confusion, not of irritation. It was a mask of terror, the same pure, childish, hopeless terror that was plastered on mine. He had heard it, every word, I think. Our gazes locked in that second that dragged on for an eternity. We weren't passenger and driver. We were two strangers sharing the same sentence. His eyes widened just a fraction more, a minuscule shake of his head, a no, but a no of supplication, a don't do anything, don't react, a silent acknowledgement that we were lost. That look broke my paralysis. This wasn't a hallucination. It was a shared nightmare. And I wasn't writing it to the end of the line to understand. That look, that shared terror was the jolt my body needed. Adrenaline screamed louder than fear. My arm moved on its own, a spasm of pure survival. My hand slammed against the red stop request button. The sound tore through the fabric of the nightmare. The stop requested light lit up on the dashboard, a desperate beacon of hope in the gloom. And for the first time since she'd boarded, the old woman behind me stopped making sounds. The air seemed to grow even heavier. I stood up. My legs were shaking violently, every muscle protesting as if carrying tons of lead. As I stood in the aisle, I couldn't help but steal one last glance. Her head was bowed, her face completely plunged into impenetrable shadows, as if she were asleep, or worse, as if she was simply waiting, satisfied. The bus began to slow, groaning like a wounded metal beast being led to slaughter. And then, through the front window, my eyes caught the view outside. Iron gates, rusted, twisted into macabre scrolls. Behind them, moss-covered graves and stone tombstones, tilted under the weight of time and neglect. The doors opened. A cold breeze, carrying the damp smell of earth and the dust of centuries, seemed to emanate from those gates. It was the old cemetery, the place where the city buried those who had departed. I recognized the structure. It was just a block from my house, a short path that separated me from that portal to the safety of my home, and I did not hesitate. Terrifyingly, I jumped, nearly tripping over my own feet, launching myself out of the bus, onto the cold sidewalk, without looking back, without a second of hesitation. I needed to get out of there, out of that cursed vehicle, away from that spectral presence, out of that world that, for one hideous moment, had overlapped with mine. The door slammed shut behind me, the final sound that trapped the terror inside. The bus took off with a fury it hadn't shown before, and just vanished into the darkness, swallowed by the night as if it had never existed. I stood there, alone, on the deserted sidewalk in front of the cemetery. My lungs burned as I gulped the cold night air, trying desperately to anchor my mind to reality. The silence of the real world was deafening. The one-block walk to my house felt like crossing a desert. Every shadow that danced in the wind was a threat. Every dry leaf that scraped along the ground was her whisper. The familiar world around me, the houses I saw every day, now seemed like a facade, a cardboard set about to be torn away, revealing the darkness behind it. I got home and turned the key on the lock once, twice. The click of the bolt was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. I leaned my back against the door and slid to the floor, my heart still a jackhammer in my chest. Safe. I was safe. But safety is an illusion. In the days that followed, the experience became an echo that resonated in the quietest corners of my mind. During the day, under the sunlight, I would convince myself with logic. It was stress, it was my imagination, it was just a strange old woman on a faulty bus, the driver was just tired and I projected my fear onto his face. I repeated these phrases like a mantra. But at night, the mantras lost their power. The silence of my room was no longer a comfort. It was the same oppressive silence of that bus. Every creak of the house made me jump. I avoided looking out the window. I developed an irrational fear of buses, of enclosed spaces, of dark hallways. Sleep became a minefield. I would wake up sweating, the echo of that hoarse voice still in my head. There's no coming back, right? I couldn't tell anyone. How could I explain it? How do you put into words the terror of a shared glance? They would say I was crazy, that I needed help. And maybe I did. The experience wasn't fading. It was lodging itself inside me, a parasite in my memory, feeding on my sanity night after night. I was living with a horror that had no name, and the fact that it had no name made it all the more real, all the more powerful. I was broken, haunted by a question that throbbed in my mind without end. What the hell had happened to me? Weeks turned into months. The experience didn't leave. It just settled, like a shard of glass lodged under the skin that doesn't hurt all the time, but is always there, ready to tear you open with the slightest movement. I learned to live with the echo, with the fear of dark places, with a distrust of silence. My life went on, but it was a faded version, a low-resolution copy of the person I was before I got on that bus. Until one random sleepless night, the kind of night where you and your phone become one, endlessly scrolling a feed to keep the thoughts at bay, I saw it. It was nothing special, a link shared in some random group. The headline was vague, almost clickbaity. Places of passage, when reality folds for a moment. Normally, I would have scrolled right past, but something in my chest went cold. It was that same feeling before I left my girlfriend's house. I clicked. It was a forum, an old blog with a simple design, and accounts, dozens of them, people telling stories they didn't have the courage to tell anywhere else. I started to read. The first account was about a subway car that between one station and the next went completely silent. The lights flickered, and through the windows the city looked older, worn out. The second was from a woman who got into an elevator in her building, and when the door opened, the hallway of her floor was different. The carpet was the wrong color. The air was heavy. She frantically pressed the button to close the door, and when it opened again, everything was back to normal. My heart began to accelerate. I kept scrolling the page. Every word was a punch to my gut. I was reading accounts that merged with my own memory, written by strangers who reported situations that haunted their memories and remained unanswered to this day. It was the validation I never asked for, and it terrified me more than the doubt itself. It was real. At the end of the post, the author gave a name to these places, to these moments. He called them folds in reality, liminal points. And the name he used, the name he gave to this other side, to this dark dimension that sometimes bleeds into ours,
The name was SETEALEN. The name fell upon me like a tombstone. All the memories snapped into place with a painful click. The bus, the darkness, the woman, the voice, the driver's eyes. I couldn't fool myself anymore. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't stress. For a few minutes of indescribable horror, I had been there. I had passed through the antechamber of hell, and by some miracle, by some stupid luck, I managed to get off the bus before the final stop. I wasn't crazy, and that was the most terrifying thing of all. That night, after reading that name, I understood I had to do something. Silence was no longer an option. The fear of sounding crazy was small compared to the need to warn, to share, to find others, to tell others. And that's why I'm here, telling you this story. My first motivation, I admit, was selfish. I wanted this account somehow to reach that driver, wherever he is. He is the only other witness. He continued the journey with her. What did he see? Did he come back? His story needs to be heard. But now I understand there is a greater purpose. This isn't just about me. It's about all the echoes left behind. If you who are listening to me now, if you have ever been in a place where reality seemed to fold for an instant, if you have ever entered a familiar room that for a second felt wrong, strange, if silence has ever weighed on you with the force of an invisible presence, if you have ever had an experience at the threshold of the unexplainable, write it down. Tell it. If you wish, send it to us at the email in the description. We will maintain total confidentiality. You are not alone. Our stories prove it. They are the maps we draw in the dark, hoping someone else finds their way back. I managed to get off the bus. Every night before I fall asleep, a question still haunts me, chilling my blood. Use the comments below to share what you think happened to that driver. Did he make it to the end of the line? Or is his journey still going on? If this story resonated with you, if you felt the same shiver down your spine, leave a sign. A like on this video shows me I'm not alone in this darkness. To continue this journey through the shadows and hear other accounts that hide in the night, join us, subscribe to the channel, and become part of this search.